Hello BookTube and hello AuthorTube. I wanted to give a quick Preptober update for you as we march closer and closer towards the month of November. November, of course, is National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, where you write a novel at 1,667 words a day to 50,000 words in the course of the month. Despite the fact that November has a major holiday in the United States, despite the fact that November is the end of term for a lot of students, despite the fact that a lot of people are moving from one home to another in the month of November. Even so, the organizers of NaNoWriMo hope that you will shoot big, that you will shoot for the moon. And you, according to the rules of NaNoWriMo, there are a few. We're going to go over those in a later video, maybe a NaNoWriMo video. But according to the rules, you can't start writing until the stroke of midnight on the 1st of November. But you can plot and plan and outline to your heart's content before then. And that explains Preptober. That is what Preptober is. That is NaNoWriMo people using the month of October to get ready for NaNoWriMo. That preparation is vital. So that you're not inventing the car while you're trying to learn how to get it to drive from A to B. You don't want to be doing that. So now is the time to be deciding on your story and then plotting it out. And I wanted to mention a couple of things in connection with that just for this video. One is specific. It deals with my own story, Kendra Victrix, which is science fiction about a young woman who has a piece of technology that is common in where she comes from, whether that's a world or a time or a dimension, but that doesn't exist here in 2020 America. And before I mentioned yesterday that I have to work out the plot. What is the story? The self-evident beginning story will be Kendra wanting to get back home, I assume. Maybe she doesn't. Who knows, one way or another. There's got to be some sort of personal drama with characters that she meets here. But as eager as I am to get to all of that, I realized on the dog walk this morning that I absolutely have to hash out all the details of that object. Because the one thing that bothers me about Kendra Victrix, but that is inescapably true, is that it is a Gizmo story. There's a MacGuffin, there's an object at the heart of the story that is important to the story. That piece of personal technology is important. And so, although that strikes me as a little irritating and I don't really know a way to get around it, because that's kind of the story that I want to write, I realize that I do need to put time and attention into figuring out what that thing is. I've already come up with a couple of basics. It is not detachable from Kendra, for instance. It's tattooed on her with bio barcodes that are they look like a tattoo, but it's not. That's the device. And the power source is Kendra herself. Her biochemistry, her body generates, the human body generates power all day long, every day. This device is able not only to use it, but to store it. So it has a vast amount of stored power. Because as much as Kendra has grown up living with this thing and using it all the time, she doesn't use it all the time. She still sleeps and does other things. So the thing always has a reserve of power. But then I was thinking, okay, well, if it can draw from her biographical power, then it might be able to give back to her biological power. It might be able to affect her body. And especially if it's tattooed onto her body. I was thinking of it first as just an iPad, as essentially a biological iPad, something that she can access and that can maybe extrude a data screen of some kind or other. But it might be able to affect her too. And that's interesting. I need to figure out what that is. I need to figure out what this thing can actually do. Now that I know where it is, now that I know how it draws its power, I have to think up what it can do. And I wanted to bring that up because a lot of you are probably thinking of writing science fiction for NaNoWriMo. And a lot of you might be getting hung up on the how of your technology, of your future tech, and you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And great science fiction authors for the last 100 years have not done that. All you have to do is think up a consistent and convincingly sounding framework for that tech. You don't have to know the physics. Okay? You don't have to go down that rabbit hole quite so deeply. And that's all that I'm going to do with this tech. I have to come up with a name for it and then figure out what it does for Kendra and what she does with it. And that has to be first. I've got a lot of thoughts on that. I'm jotting some of them down on a Google document. Because that, ideally, this is Tuesday, ideally that needs to be done today, at least with as much detail as I'm ever going to use, so that I can then move on to Kendra's personality, Where she comes from would be a big thing to know. And also what happens to her when she's here. Who are the people that she meets here? I need to know all of that by the end of this week. So today I have been concentrating on fleshing out that one piece of technology. The one piece of technology that Kendra brings to this world. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about involves NaNoWriMo just generally, because a lot of you are trying it for the first time this year, and a lot of you are looking ahead at it and thinking 1,667 words a day is a lot. That's a lot. And how am I going to work that in to my day? And we're going to have plenty of videos about making a routine out of writing that guarantees you will get your writing time done. But I wanted to mention an approach to that I really like, something that worked well for me and that you might want to try yourself. And it's twofold. It takes two parts to it. One is to bump that word count up to an even 1,700, at least for the first week. Typically in NaNoWriMo, the first week is jet-fueled. You feel invincible, like you can do no wrong, and then you hit the dreaded second week, when complications rear their ugly head, when the story suddenly throws up tangles and pitfalls that you didn't see. Even in the most exhaustive outlining, you didn't see them. That's going to happen. There are going to be twists and turns that you cannot foresee in the outlining process that you're going to have to just write your way through. That tends to happen in the second week of NaNoWriMo, and it tends to dispirit a lot of people. There's no way around that, and that is a valuable thing for a writer to go through. That exact period, that exact dark night of the soul, is a valuable thing for writers to go through. It will, in Benjamin Sisko's words, show you what you're made of. My approach to it is to take advantage of the fact that you know you're going to be on that norepinephrine high for the first week. So for the first week at least, bump your daily total up to 1,700 words. If you can keep it up, then you'll exceed 50,000 words at the end of the month. And even if you can't, you'll have a cushion when the bad times come, either in the second week or the third week. So part one of this practical discussion is to bump your word count up to 1,700. Just mentally make it that. And the second thing, just a practical thing that you might want to consider trying, that makes it a little less intimidating, a little bit more handleable, is to make each one of those 1,700 word implements, each one of those days, a discrete chapter in your book. So that you're not leaving anything in mid-chapter. And of course, a chapter is a kind of mini book within a book, or it should be. It should have a dramatic unity of its own. It should have dramatic progress of its own. Something should happen in every chapter. And compartmentalizing like this so that your every day, your 1,700 words is a chapter of its own is a really good way to look at that. It's a really good way to see that and work on it that way. So your Preptober update is one personal and one sort of general. The personal is that I am now working on the technology, the MacGuffin for Kendra Victrix. What is it? What can it do? And how will it react to the world around it when it gets here? Then the next thing I need to do before I do anything else is figure out where Kendra comes from. Figure out the heart of the story. How did she get here? Is it intentional? So if it's intentional, then she won't want to go back home and that whole element of the plot will be gone. If it isn't intentional, then she will. I need to figure all of that out next. That has to happen tomorrow, I think. Tonight I will work on the technology. And then there's the general, which is the two things that you might want to consider. One is taking advantage of the jet-fueled nature of the first week of NaNoWriMo to up your word count every day, 1,700 instead of 1,667. And two, to make that 1,700 a chapter so that you set out during the day not to move the plot forward X number of paces, not to cover this general woolly subject, but to write the next chapter. So your book would have 30 chapters. Might want to try it. It's worked wonders for me. So anyway, that's your Preptober update for today. If I can, I'll make a Preptober update tomorrow. And I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube, and thank you, AuthorTube.